Government officials at all levels started vehemently protesting that their partners, their international political partners, had utterly betrayed and abandoned them. There's this General Gurulev with his perpetually odd, boozy face, who is now shouting that the Indians have betrayed them. They successfully intercepted and held up the massive tanks, specifically the tankers carrying Russian oil that was headed west to be sold, which would have brought in significant financial revenue for the state. For the oligarchs, of course, but not for Russia itself. But Gurulev is shouting about this, saying that we, such good people, and Russia is good, provided millions of jobs in Siberia for the Indians. But can you imagine, Indians are working at factories in Siberia? They provided many millions of stable jobs to the Indian people. But then those very same Indians just unexpectedly tripped them up from behind and gave them a sharp, painful kick in the back. But for Russians, for officials, a kick in the back, my friends, is what they call a sign of love and understanding, that soon they'll get paid again. Not to the state, but into their own pockets. And now Elvira Nabiullina is shouting. Or rather, the entire Russian business community started shouting, because the central bank, led by Elvira Nabiullina, they went and switched the Russian currency not to dollars in international settlements as it was before, always, and as it is in all other countries too. Everything is in international money. International money means the American dollar. It's small, it's unstable, it's not a doomsday currency. The doomsday currency, as I told you, is the Swiss franc. That's a real currency. And for those who keep their money in dollars, my friends, well, that's your problem too. If you need advice, reach out. I'll tell you some things that will help you preserve your money in the future. Otherwise, by all means, act on your own, as you always have, and lose your money. But that's not all. Major Chinese financial institutions have quietly frozen the acceptance of all yuan payments without making any official public announcement. Consequently, Elvira Nabiullina has now switched all international settlements over to the Chinese yuan. Remember? Yes, that was just a few years ago. Everyone was outraged, saying that analysts predicted it would be an economic collapse. Everyone did all the calculations. But Elvira, she's no fool. She's actually a very competent economist. She was trained for this in the international community, not in Russia. And at Yale University, that's where her roots go back to. But as of today, Elvira Nabiullina has converted everything into yuan, handing it over to the mercy of the Chinese economy, which couldn't catch its breath. No one wanted to settle in yuan, and only Russia, with its enormous capital, oil and gas, investments and turnover, suddenly decided to make a change. Yes, because sitting there in the Kremlin as an advisor, as a commander, is a former Chinese counterintelligence officer who actually directs the actions. Why the actions of the Kremlin? And Elvira Nabiullina, she can't go anywhere. It's her money too, it's her job as well. And she also obeys the leadership of the Celestial Empire of China. The Chinese leadership includes the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, and the Baruchs, who have moved and intermarried. But the Rothschild's son, the same one, who do we have? The owner of Facebook and Meta. Where is he? He married the richest Chinese woman, the wealthiest, from a powerful Chinese clan. So naturally he is there. He lives there, he likes it more there. In China he lives like a king, and so do his children. And honestly, I like that. People know how to make their way in life. Well, that's actually very good. But in general, with Stalin, with Muammar, with Gaddafi, with Stalin's grandchildren, well, Stalin himself was ruthless. And what kind of grandchildren will there be? Yes, Muammar Gaddafi's children. What will they be like? Also ruthless. One of the children was born to a Russian girl who lived in Crimea, and she gave birth to the child. The child, well, that's already a great-grandchild. For Stalin, that is. Of course, he was hidden away. What do you think? They took the girl away, as they say, from the beast. This guy, Muammar Gaddafi's son. They took the girl and brought her to Crimea. And they hid her there. And there are military bases all around. That's all there is to it. Where does she live there? Well, I definitely can't tell you where she lives, because I simply don't know where she lives. But the fact is, there are military bases all around, Russian ones, not Ukrainian. They've always been there. When was she hidden away? Back when Crimea was still under Ukrainian control. And even then, Russian units were already stationed there. You might not know that this was the case, but those who are in the know it. The entire territory of Crimea was surrounded by Russian military units. The mountains, and what else is there? Tunnels in the mountains. All of this was under the control, not of the Ukrainian command, but the Russian command. Because the Russian GRU General Staff was in charge there. That's Russian military intelligence. They were the ones in charge, especially in the Crimean mountains. But the cops, who are closely connected with the FSB, that's a bit of a different story, a different kind of work. Yes, the FSB is a lower-level part, although I want to tell you that traditionally the GRU, military intelligence, I repeat, and the FSB, the KGB, they competed with each other. But when the FSB still had the abbreviation KGB, back then the KGB was a strong organization and it could, well, let's say, go head-to-head with intelligence. But now it can't anymore, because as soon as it got those 3 letters, FSB, it became, well, at least 5 times weaker. Well, if Philip Bobkov, the head of the 5th Directorate, suddenly became the head, the specialized security unit was located in the village of Gorky 10, which is exactly where Gushinsky's private residence was situated, and he personally headed his own security detail. But can you imagine the KGB doing this? Philip Bobkov. And he, in principle, was a very big man back then. Well, and then he was a beast. I remember Vassilieva. Lyudmila Vassilieva was actually very afraid of him. She used to meet with him. Vassilieva is the writer Vassilieva who wrote about the Kremlin. She used to be a friend of mine once. I used to go to her dacha, far away. We went somewhere where her father's tank stands, a T-34. That was her legendary father. Then, as it turns out, history reveals that he wasn't the one who created it, that it was, again, part of a German machine, but that's not important anymore. What matters is that she lived with honor, a big house, a huge plot of land, and in the distance, that tank stood. I was there, my children were there, they climbed all over that tank. But in general, life is different. And the officials tell you this way that now they are forced to obey China and the Indians. I am Tanya Karatsuba, Said Burhan. I don't know how the video was recorded. I think he stayed with me, somewhere, by myself. Maybe I left something out.